House Rebel News fans, I am absolutely proud to give you an interview with Steve Struggle. Steve Struggle is a Black Panther, and I'm talking about the Black Panthers from the 1960s. He's one of the original guys that led revolution in the United States back during the Civil Rights era, during the Vietnam War, during the original time when there was the most revolutionary potential that the United States ever faced. And I have him here in an interview for you, and I am absolutely astonished that someone of his cred would be willing to sit down and answer some questions by me. So I first really want to thank you, Steve Struggle, for this, because this is going to be honestly one of the most awesome videos that I've ever made. And like I said, I want to thank you, comrade, for joining me. Now, Steve, you've been fighting revolution since the 1960s, and you continue to fight for revolution to this day. You were involved with the original Black Panther Party. Where did it all begin for you?
Well, I would say that most of my political activity began in high school. People have told me that when I was in high school, somebody from the FBI came to our high school once to give a speech, and I actually got and actually made a statement to denounce the FBI during the assembly. So I guess it all began then. I've worked with a number of different radical revolutionary and activist groups during my life, and I think it's been a good thing to do that. I'm much happier doing that than just going to work and coming home.
Now, when did you start with the Panthers?
When I was in high school, and this was 1971, 72, and did work with them off and on till I would say 1979, 1980.
There is a lot of confusion about the Panthers. Groups like the New Black Panthers are trying to use the original Panther image. How do you see these original Panthers and their historical origin?
Well, if you look at the historical framework in which the Black Panther Party developed, you have to look at the history. It came out of the 1966 SNCC movement, and then the Black Panther voting movement in Mississippi and in Alabama. So that's when the term Black Panther even was begun. Before the Black Panther Party, you had the black masses themselves using the symbol Black Panther for civil rights and advanced politics. So the Black Panther Party pretty much came about in Oakland, California in '66 and organized pretty much initially against police terror. It was more of I would say it was a cop watch kind of group, but it had that same kind of orientation that we're going to patrol and also monitor the police. And it evolved into a revolutionary nationalist organization, and then a revolutionary internationalist organization in the subsequent 2 or 3 years after 66, 68, 69. The focus was around a 10-point program, which is usually focused on African American political, economic, and domestic issues, calling for reparations, end to police terror, food, clothing, housing, and justice. Somewhat similar to the 10-point program that Muhammad Speaks had. It wasn't along that line, but they both had 10-point programs. So that really that's what the Black Panther Party was about initially. It grew into more of an anti-imperialist organization with the upsurge of things like the Vietnam War, the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution, the fighting in the streets in major urban centers in France in 1968. There were many upheavals around the world that catalyzed the Black Panther Party into taking a more internationalist positions.
So their ideology evolved?
Right. Well, if you know a little of the history, one of the phenomena they were involved in '68 was to sell the Red Book in Berkeley to raise money. They ordered what was then called Chairman Mao's Little Red Book and went to sell it in Berkeley. And because they were selling it, they had to read what they were selling. So that gave them some introduction into Mao Zedong thought, and developed I would say, more of a traditional viewpoint of revolutionary science. Most of the books we read, really, in my political education, the Panthers weren't Marx. They read more Cornforth or people who were interpreting Marx in a certain kind of way. So it was more new Marxian material, built along a communist perspective.
So when you joined the Panthers, was the movement like in ascending, or was it kind of going into a decline?
I think it was ascending still. The Panther Party, people that I worked with were not in like your major Panther centers. They were in your smaller community towns, and they still had support from the black community. You know, people still send their children to Panther centers to have breakfast. They still went to the Panther centers for health care. We still took people to prisons to visit their loved ones. We still had militant fightbacks against cop terror. Remember that the Civic Committee of the Black Panther Party shut down the Black Panther Party nationally to run Bobby Seale for mayor and Elaine Brown for city council. And that was the beginning of the so-called downturn or downfall of the Panthers, when they began to adopt the electoral reformist politics as their only activity, to the demise of any kind of dual revolutionary tactics. They said, well, we're going to bring everybody, shut down the United States operation, which was a great mistake.
One of the greatest things that Mao spoke about was serving the people. Now, did you have any experience with the Panther Serve the People program? Like, I remember the old free breakfast programs. Were you involved in that?
Yes, I mean, I think most students who eat free breakfast in U.S. schools don't know it was the Black Panther Party started their program. The U.S. government did not start their program until the Black Panther Party did it, and it came under great pressure to do something to undermine their activity. So I was involved in all that stuff. Busing in prisons, free breakfast programs, health care, you name it, I did it.
The Vietnamese were defeating U.S. imperialism. The Maoist cultural revolution called on the world to rise up. Lin Biao said, "Revolution is the main trend." How did it feel to be in the middle of that rising tide of anti-imperialism and socialist revolution? Because, straight up, I'm jealous. Because, we're in this, terribly awful, liberal, useless position right now. What was it like to be around when things were actually taking off and the world actually was going towards revolution?
It felt fantastic. It felt like I look back at that now in my personal history, and I think that was me making a contribution to the anti-imperialist and revolutionary struggle, and I'm very happy I was able to do that. And I think because I have this experience and I have a different perspective now, I think that those who are making the struggle now should listen to some of our experiences and some of our stories, some of the things we went through, so that certain mistakes are not made again.
Okay, I want to ask you another question, more about where we are right now. Can you comment on the recent police terror? Like, what do you think about all this community self-defense activism that's going on now, given the tremendous amount of violence that's being carried out against the African American population?
Well, I think it's a critical but controversial move to be engaged in. Critical because if you're not fighting back against cop terror, you're just letting the cops walk over you. At the same time, people are still scared to do it. They know if you fight back against the cops, it means you're really sticking your neck out. So those people who are not scared to do it, to me, are essentially the new vanguard. If you're not scared to fight against cop terror in this era, at least you are of the caliber of person who could become a vanguard fighter. Because of the cop terror, people don't want the cops beating their kids up, etc. But to a certain extent, people are still a little reluctant to get too far out there because they know the response can be death at the hands of the cops, beatings, this kind of thing. I mean, look at what's happened in Ferguson. You've seen very clearly that the Ferguson Police Department was organized to extract taxes from black people, to bring money in from black people, okay? So we see right there, the police department's aim, its goal, was to harass the black community and to decimate them with fines. So we see them doing that on fines. What do you think they're going to do if people become active? The only way to prevent the retaliation and harassment is for everybody to become active, because they can't repress everybody.
The LLCO, the leading communist organization, has talked about the need for developing, or the revolutionary movement needs to develop a backbone, like a warrior spirit, because today the left, particularly what is supposed to be Marxists, are terribly weak. They whine over the use of words. They whine over the most petty, insignificant things, and they're tremendously liberal. None of them want to go out and fight. Everybody just wants to sit and complain, and nobody wants to actually take, any kind of radical action. I mean, the warrior spirit was a huge thing for revolutionary China. People stood up and combated things. They didn't sit there whining about petty, meaningless stuff. I mean, I wholeheartedly agree. We do need a warrior spirit. I mean, if we're supposed to be revolutionaries, we're supposed to be fighting, right? What do you think?
Well, I think LLCO is exactly correct. I mean, you can't have a revolution only by marches. You can't have it only by meetings. You have to be able to do the sterner stuff and take the political stance that is risky, but it shows you understand the depth of your enemy. See, we're talking about U.S. imperialism. We're not talking about a dinner party. We're not talking about a frat party. We're talking about people who routinely send AWACS over to site a target, send laser-guided bombs to kill a target, and then send other jets over to see if the target was wiped out. This is something that they do routinely. They routinely attack nations for obtaining nuclear weapons when they are the only ones in the world to ever use nuclear weapons. They routinely engage in mass surveillance of everyone's email and phone calls around the world. We're talking about a government that is so dictatorial and so corrupt that when the State Department person last week talked about the U.S. government would never involve in anything illegal, immoral, or unethical, a news reporter had to laugh at the State Department person because it's clearly untrue. So this kind of enemy you have, the United States, France, Great Britain, Japan, Italy, Germany, all these Western powers, you won't be able to challenge them and force them to make concessions and force them to step back and declare territory yours, or even defeat them if you're playing softball. You have to play hardball. Like Mao said,
the state attacked the Black Panthers. The Panthers were the target of COINTERPOL. State attacks activists. Recently, Comrade Prairie Fire of the LLCO was attacked.
So and also, we know that there was a lot of slander about this or that made against leaders of the Black Panther Party. We know that whenever there's a strong leader who is a pole that the state wants to bring down, the state will plant lies, and also, unfortunately, some left groups will engage in rumor mongering and character assassination. I've just been astonished that I see people using Facebook, which is monitored by the police. Everyone knows that. Using Facebook as a medium to spread defamation, character assassination about this or that, someone's done this and that, and instead of engaging in polemics about a political line that you have a difference with. And usually that's what it comes down to. They're the person or organization being defamed and slandered has a different political view than those engaged in the slander. And there was a pamphlet put out by a black group one day that said, stop slander, defend principal unity. I think that was really the way to go. And people should know, when you hear people doing rumor mongering, slandering, he did this, she said that, I heard this, you got to step back and say, wait a minute. Is this the FBI? This is what the FBI does. This is what the CIA does. This is what they use news media do to attack Venezuela, to attack the DPRK, to attack China, to attack anybody they want to attack. They always use slander, mistruths, lies, and half stories to create false impressions of what people are actually doing. And it's always going to be against those who are against imperialism. They're always going to be the targets.
The Panthers were not dogmatic. And I myself have come under attack for my approach, my anti-dogmatic approach. And so many people have yelled and complained about, Jason under this and Jason under that, saying some of the most ridiculous things.
Yeah, I think, case in point, there was an interview that Jason Unruh did recently where he talked about why he embraced the internet as his medium. He talked about in the day of Lenin when people were actually using paper to print papers and they were reading the newspaper, and now people can read and explore media through the internet. And that's why his program is based on the internet. It's like 21st century situation. So I do think we have to be as creative as we can be and not forget what our purpose though is. Because some people will be so creative they will forget about their purpose. And if we're organizing a communist movement, if we're organizing the proletariat and the peasantry and the oppressed on a worldwide level, that we have to keep that as our purpose. And our tactics can vary, but they should never deviate from what is acceptable.
Thank you for your kind words about my work. That actually really means a lot coming from someone like you, and I really appreciate that. What works would you recommend revolutionaries study today?
Huey Newton, Angela Davis. People have issues with Eldridge Cleaver. I still think you should read some of his revolutionary writings. George Jackson, Jonathan Jackson, Mao Zedong, Lenin, Stalin, Giap, Ho Chi Minh. LCO has put out books, Monkey Smasher's Heaven series. They put out books, Casting Pearls, Philosophy, A Science, Art, Revolution. Books such as Caesar Rising. These are books that people should read.
Okay, don't want to take up too much of your time because I know you're busy. I really want to thank you for doing this interview. I mean, this has been really awesome for me to talk to like someone who was like really there and actually did things. It's just really cool to actually talk to a guy who's got experience and has actually done stuff during a time when things were actually going on. And I'm very, very honored to have you be willing to sit down and do an interview with me. It was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much.
Well, I think, first of all, Jason, your show has been so inspirational on YouTube. I mean, to me, that's a quantum leap of revolutionary activism and education we haven't seen in decades. So I would tell the youth to watch your program, to ask questions, to be engaged, and to learn about the science of struggle, the science of communism from you and programs like yours. I also would encourage you to use the music and culture of revolution to create a new environment in which they live. So your culture, your thinking, your actions, your words, your music, your artists you love are always revolutionary. And the third thing is to don't think that this is going to be an easy fight. It's going to go on for generations, but if we are prepared, disciplined, organized, and follow the correct political line, eventually, with a decisive manner, we will win.